So my name is Stephanie Chacon, and I started in the compounding industry back in 2009. I became a non-sterile compounding technician and then eventually became a sterile compounding technician. I just really loved that compounding is this interesting mixture of art and science. So I have a really logical side, but I also have an artistic side. So it kind of ended up just being like the perfect career for me that I didn't even know existed until I accidentally got a job at this compounding pharmacy.
So
And
let me just stop you there. So did you just randomly end up at a compounding pharmacy and that's how you learned about the business? And from there, did you become a technician?
yeah, so I actually had my technician license because I very briefly worked as a clerk at a small pharmacy in college. And I was looking for a job in 2009. I had just graduated with my bachelor's degree. It was a recession. I was just praying for any job that I could get. And this pharmacy hired me at first to manage their OTC vitamins. They had a lot of supplements, and I knew a lot about that from my background. So that's what they hired me for. And I
So
saw the lab.
what was your college, your degree from in?
It was just university studies, really general, but I spent a lot of time working at GNC in college, so I knew a lot about vitamins and supplements, which is what I think got them to hire me in the first place.
Mhm.
And as soon as I saw the lab, I was just immediately interested. I was like, what's this? What are you doing here? I need to know all about this. And they started to see that I was kind of type A, sort of OCD. Everything had to be really organized. I was very thorough. And they knew I had my tech license. So they asked, like, are you interested in learning compounding? Which, of course, I immediately jumped at the chance. I was so excited. I ordered a book I found online. I don't even remember where, about compounding. And it wasn't much, it was pretty short. I was just so excited to learn, which I think really is one of the best things you can do when you're wanting to grow your career, is be excited about learning and be curious.
Definitely.
Yeah, so from there, I kind of just picked up everything I could, learned everything I could, and sort of inserted myself into this position of leadership. It wasn't like, oh, here, we want you to step into this role. I kind of just went after it. So I knew what I wanted. I didn't wait for someone to say, oh, hey, here's this thing we want you to do. I just thought, this is what I want. I'm going to go after it. And
So,
luckily, I really,
and sorry for interrupting. Hang on. But I'm just curious as to how that works. You said you inserted yourself into leadership. So what was it that you saw that you wanted to be more involved in? And how did they react to that? Were they like, great, we need another hands-on person? Or yeah.
it kind of was a combination of me inserting myself and then just someone vacating a position. So, like I said, I learned everything I could. I like to know as much as I can about anything that I'm doing. So I sought a lot of information on my own. I joined a lot of listservs, learned everything I could. And there was a pharmacist that had been running the compounding lab, and he ended up quitting or leaving. He was removed from the position. So in his absence, I kind of stepped up. You know, if somebody had a question, they would come to me because I had done all this research. I took all this time to learn about formulas and compounds and what's going to work and what's not going to work. One, because I found it really interesting, and two, because I did want to grow my career and I did want to move forward. So all of a sudden, I sort of became this like unofficial authority because I had all this knowledge that I went out and I learned and I taught myself. So they would come and they would ask me these questions that usually they would ask him. So I kind of just inserted myself slash gradually became a leader in the compounding lab.
So all of this at this point is still an unofficial education. At some point, did that become a problem, or or was that totally sufficient? I mean, you said you were talking to other people on listservs and things like that. So, were you able to go to other people for advice? Yeah, I'm assuming you were able to go to other people for advice and things like that, and then be able to utilize that in the facility you were at. Um, so where did that leave you in terms of education? Because don't you have a master's?
I do have a
So
master's
like what
degree.
point did you move forward, like realize you had to move forward?
Yeah, so back in, probably around 2011 or 12, I started going to conferences because at the time that was really what there was. You know, if you wanted to learn more about compounding, you would go to conferences. And I had a really supportive pharmacist in charge, and we had a really supportive business manager. You know, they saw my passion and they were happy to encourage that. So they let me go with them to these conferences, and that's where I really started gaining so much more knowledge. But then, you know, that's only going to take me so far. And because I love to learn, I started thinking, all right, I've got a bachelor's degree. It's not really in anything. Now it's an opportunity for me to go find another degree that's going to be in exactly what I care about doing. And I really loved the quality regulatory aspect. Of course, NECC happened in 2012. So there was this big focus on the shifting regulations and quality, and everybody started to really pay attention and care about that. So I kind of started Googling what kind of programs were out there. And a few years later, after I had become a quality manager, I was able to sign up for the Temple University master's program within their School of Pharmacy for regulatory affairs and quality assurance. And that's where I was able to get like an official, you know, education in quality and regulatory.
So, what advice can you give to other people, or is there any parts of this experience that you feel could have been more efficient? I mean, it sounded like you had a great leadership team already in place that was encouraging and supportive of you taking you to the conferences and stuff like that. How do you think this would have turned out if you had a team, because that wasn't so supportive? Let's say you went into the lab and you were like, this is awesome and I want to do more, and they're like, well, you don't have the qualifications, or you need to be a pharmacist, because I hear that's a big problem right now. A lot of technicians want to do things, but you need to have the PharmD label, correct?
Yeah, it does definitely feel like you're either a pharmacist or you're a tech, and there's really nothing in between.
Mhm.
But there is, especially in quality and compliance work, because I can do quality work, I can do regulatory work without being a pharmacist. You know, I don't touch any of the clinical stuff, I'm not counseling patients, I'm not deciding on dosage, none of that. So that's why I think quality is a great place for technicians to grow their career, because you can do all that work without, you know, I went and got a master's. You don't have to do that. There's, you know, shorter training programs online. There's e-learning. There's things like ASQ where you can just buy different textbooks to read. You can do online webinars. There's tons of resources for learning information about quality that are not super expensive. So even if you're at a smaller pharmacy that has a more limited budget, or you're paying for it on your own even, there's a lot of options out there.
Excellent. Are there any questions that you get from people when you do this that I'm not thinking of? When you talk to people, like, do you go to some of the big events, the big pharmacy events, and talk to other technicians who want to know, how to replicate what you're doing?
I do try to go to events. I often don't find very many technicians there, which always kind of makes me sad because I think technicians play such an important role. And of course, I'm always encouraging them to be in quality because it's such a good place for them to be. But again, you have to have that supportive leadership in your pharmacy that's willing to take you to these conferences and get you exposed.
Hmm.
And part of it might be that they might not even know you're interested. So I told you that I'm really driven, very type A. I wasn't shy about saying, hey, I want to go to this. I want to learn these things.
Hmm.
I went and I looked up what was out there and said, hey, there's this online course or there's this conference I want to go to. It costs this much money. Do you think, you know, that's in the budget and that I can go and do that? You know, your pharmacist might not even know that you're interested or wanting to learn any of this stuff. So speak up if you are, because they might not realize it.
I wonder if you could expand on, if you're a tech and you're in the pharmacy role and you said go into quality, would all techs if you're in a compounding pharmacy, would you automatically understand the opportunities in quality, or do you need, like, is that something that, since you were really involved and you really wanted to do that, you educated yourself on? And the reason why I'm asking is, let's say you've got a tech who's or a tech is watching this and they're like, I'd like to do more, but I'm not really sure how to go, where it is I want to go. Maybe you could expand a little bit on the roles and the opportunities if you're not fully aware of what they are.
Yeah, a lot of pharmacies, I don't think even have formally established quality departments, which is one thing I'm hoping to change through
Mhm.
the course of my career. But there's usually going to be some sort of role, maybe like a compliance officer or something around compliance, especially if you're a PCAB pharmacy. there's probably going to be something like that. It might be a pharmacist in the position, but it doesn't need to be. So I would start getting curious, finding out from your pharmacy how things are structured, who's doing what. Maybe it's a pharmacist that's doing all this work, and it's a lot. It's a lot of work. And plus the pharmacists, they've got to take calls, they got to do the clinical stuff, the consults. They might be really happy to offload some of that work to a technician.
Mhm.
So I would think about, get curious, ask about, hey, what do we do for compliance? Are we doing any audits? Can I start maybe performing audits? Little simple things like that. Can I take a look at our most recent inspection and see what the findings were? Maybe there's some things I can improve. Just kind of, like I said, sort of inserting yourself into the place you want to go.
Mhm. Excellent. And what if somebody's not in compounding pharmacy?
Yeah, so there's technicians that just work at regular
And
pharmacies.
what do they do? They like sort the pills and put them in the boxes and things.
Yeah, so most technicians that work in just regular pharmacy are just going to be counting out pills. In hospital pharmacies, you might do a little bit more. You might do some sterile compounding. It's limited. Even some pharmacies like Walgreens might do minimal compounding, like maybe a magic mouthwash or something where you're just mixing a couple of commercially available things together. But most technicians are going to mainly be counting pills and just filling prescriptions.
So
And
yeah, so let's say you're a tech in one of those pharmacies and you're like, this is really boring and what you're doing sounds really great. Again, like maybe you could elaborate on, expand on what the roles and the opportunities are for somebody. I mean, you were in a compounding pharmacy and in pharmacy, so you saw what there was to do. But for people maybe who don't know.
yeah, I think if you're wanting to grow your career as a technician, compounding is where to go. So whether that's a retail pharmacy or a hospital pharmacy, anywhere that compounding is going to happen is going to be a good place for your career to grow. Regular retail pharmacies that don't compound, I can't speak to that too much. I've never worked at a pharmacy like that. There might be some opportunities there. They might do some quality control stuff. They might do some, auditing or inventory audits, things like that.
Yeah, no,
But
what I mean
compound,
is like, what I mean is let's say you're in a regular retail pharmacy and they like, oh, they hear you and they're like, oh, wow, that sounds really cool. I want to do that, but I've never been in a compounding pharmacy. So like, what do they even do? Like, how do they even start saying, I'd like to go, like sorting pills is boring. I like this idea of getting involved in a lab and I like this, but I have no real idea of what goes on in a compounding pharmacy. So, because like you knew because you were in it. So you knew, like you said, how to insert yourself into audits and things like that. But if
Mhm.
somebody is maybe on board in a retail pharmacy and I would like to, go into something else, like how are the, I mean, am what I asking even making sense? Like if
Yeah, so if you're just doing the pill counting thing and you want to do more, I would look up, go to Google, search compounding pharmacies in your area, check out what compounding pharmacies are close to where you live, look up and see if any of them are hiring. Even just check out their website, see if they have any social media. Some of them will post videos of what they're doing. You can see their labs, you can see some of their compounding processes. That way you can kind of see what's going on. And honestly, sometimes good technicians are hard to find. So they might just be hiring. Take a look at that. And even if you've never compounded before, apply. Tell them that you're interested and that it looks really cool and you want to try it. I can't guarantee that they would hire you, of course, but getting somebody that's really interested and finds compounding, like it might be fun or it might be a great way to grow their career. I mean, if I was hiring, that would really pique my interest.
all right, great. Any other words of advice?
Uh, Actions speak louder than words. So whether you're coming in from the outside or you're a technician that's been where you are for a while, it's all good to talk the talk, but you've really got to walk the walk. So if you're interested, learn what you can. There's a lot of free information out there that you don't have to pay for. Find that, start there, and show your interest by the actions that you take in your pharmacy. And I think that'll get your pick, your pharmacy owner, your manager, your supervisor, that'll get their attention because a lot of people aren't even willing to take that action and to go that far. So I think if you take action and demonstrate your passion and your drive to do more, that's going to go a long way. There was one thing that you asked that I wanted to go back to. You had asked about, the formal education. And before I had got my master's degree, I would do the inspections, of course, with our pharmacist in charge. But the state inspectors, they would always ask me, where did you learn all this? What's your degree in? And at the time I was like, oh, nothing. I don't have a formal education in this scenario. And then eventually I did get my master's, but a lot of it was learned through going to conferences, finding information that I could online, buying what textbooks were out there, and just being curious. So like I mentioned initially, you don't need to have a formal education for it. You don't have to go get an expensive master's degree to do this work, but you do have to put in the effort to go find that information and to learn.
I have a question about that. When you're self-taught, how do you know you're extracting the correct information? I mean, is it cut and dry, or is there some
Well,
stuff that you could misunderstand or misinterpret?
it is definitely not cut and dry. So having a good mentor,
Mm,
having someone around you that does understand things or is willing to at least learn with you. So like I mentioned, I've worked under a couple of really great pharmacists in charge that were just awesome, and they really did help me quite a bit. Going to the conferences when you can be around other people that maybe have more experience or education than you and you learn from them, that also helps. Some of the training courses also offer like a competency assessment. So there might be a little test or something at the end, and then you get a certificate. And that also helps too, because then you take that test and you actually have proof I did learn what I was supposed to from this session. Getting CEs from the conferences
mhm.
that are on information around compounding or quality, that also helps too, because then you know that that is not just something you necessarily read in a book and had to interpret on your own, but somebody was teaching that information to you.
So the CEs are broken down into two categories, pharmacists and technicians. Do you think that, I mean, if you want to increase your leadership role, and like I know when we do it, a lot of it is still the same content. Does it matter if you get the technician or the C or the pharmacist CE? Or do you think like, and the reason why I'm asking, because you've got a technician who wants to move more into leadership. So is it better for them to get the CE credit as a technician or get the pharmacist CE credit?
I think when you try to upload your credits, if like
Mm,
I'm a PTCB certified technician, so if I try to put
right, so
pharmacist
you,
credits in, it's like this warning
right.
error.
Yeah, I just realized it was
But
kind of a dumb question.
but if you learned that and you went to that session and you attended it, keep a record of that, put that in your employee file, because you want to prove that you're competent to do the job that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I didn't have a formal education, but I still had documented evidence, that I attended these CEs. Maybe I didn't get credit because I'm a tech, not a pharmacist, but I was still able to put that in my file and show that I went and I learned these different things.
Okay, that's an excellent point. All right, great. Because also I noticed, and I don't know if you noticed this as well, one of the reasons we're offering the technician credits is I get a lot of feedback that there are not enough technician conferences offering the technician credits, which is interesting because, like I said, even when I do it, it's basically the same content. So is that
Yeah,
what you experienced?
there's a lot of like free CEs and stuff that's out there, but it's not great because it's not necessarily relevant to what you're doing in a compounding pharmacy. So yeah, I can go get some free CEs on whatever random topic that I can find online. But if you're working in a compounding pharmacy, your CEs really need to be on that topic. They really need to apply to what you're doing so that it can make you better at your job instead of just being some random thing that you're simply getting so that you can have enough credits to keep your certification.
Got it. Okay. All right, excellent. Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I guess we'll talk soon. I hope we talk.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Have a good
You too.
weekend. Bye.
Bye.